Hi, welcome to Learning Leaders Spotlight, the podcast where we interview learning leaders to provide information to help the leaders of tomorrow. I am your host, Leanne Langford. I'm the president of Training Pros. Training Pros is a contract L&D staffing company. We like to say when you have more projects than people, let us find you the quality consultants to start your project with confidence. I'm really pleased that my guest today is a very engaging man who's going to give us a lot of good information. It's Kevin Farrell. He's the Director of Learning Experience Design at Liberty Mutual Insurance. Hi, Kevin. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm thrilled. I would love it if you'd give us a 60-second overview of who you are and what you do.
Sure. So as you said, Kevin Farrell, run Learning Experience Design for Liberty Mutual Insurance. And basically what that means is our audience is the frontline individuals that sell, service, and process claims for our, myriad of insurance products. And we also serve our third-party agent partners. So all in, about 35,000 people, right? Involves onboarding, ongoing development, and it's all in that technical space, the nuts and bolts of how you do your job.
Fantastic. That's a big responsibility, big company. Can you tell our listeners at home what it was that initially attracted you to L&D?
So my father was a teacher for 38 years, told me if I became a teacher, he would kill me. So I got around it. I think like a lot of folks in our industry, it tends to find you or you gravitate towards it when you're working and doing possibly something else. And that was the case for me. And I was at Fidelity Investments. And at the time we were just getting email and we had 401ks on websites. And this was fascinating to folks that were just experiencing the internet for the first time. And we were getting a lot of questions from people around who can see my money? Is this private? What's going on? And I was on a team that was chartered with servicing customers and explaining these things to them. So they had a specialized team to explain to people basically how browsers work and what encryption is to make sure customers are calm about things. And they overheard me talking to different clients about this, and they liked the analogy that I used and how I explained things. And one thing led to another. They had me speak to some of the major clients like Raytheon and so on. You would go down and you would talk to them about the 401k.com website and so on. And from there, training got wind of some of the things I was doing and asked me if I was interested in doing like part-time instruction while I was on the job. Did that and eventually got a full-time role in the training organization. And that just basically led from instruction to instructional design, then into the e-learning space and learning technology and so on and so forth.
It's a common story. So it does sound like the training department sought you out because you had a natural ability to be in this field. Whereas, some of us say, oh, this looks like a great field. I think I'd enjoy it. Let me go get the education and try to get a job in it. But yours was the opposite. It came after you.
It seemed to. The opportunity lined up and I did enjoy it. I married a teacher, so I've been kind of in this, education orbit all my life. So the opportunities just kind of presented themselves and they seem to really align with things I enjoy. I mean, there's no other field that allows you to be creative, use science, engage with people, help people. I mean, the majority of folks that are in our industry, you have to like people, and this is a great place to do it.
It's a field of helpers is what I've always said is we always want to find a way to help. Sometimes it's harder than others, but we always want to find a way to help. The other thing I've always loved about the training field is the people that are in it with us. I feel I've always just had a good rapport with people in our field.
Yes. There's a lot of like-minded folks. And my mother was a nurse. And I think these types of roles where people just naturally gravitate to supporting people, educating people, serving people, and so on, it's a good environment to be in. It's a healthy environment. That's what I would say.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love it. So there's been a lot of changes in L&D since the days you were talking about where we were just getting the internet.
Yes.
Can you tell us the biggest changes you've seen in the last few years in L&D?
The biggest one I've seen is around data driving learning more so than ever before, making decisions based on data, proving out impact with data. Those components for me are the things that I think have been a huge driver. And we've taken advantage of that for a few years now. When I joined Liberty, decision was made at the time to say, okay, let's leverage KPI data to hold ourselves accountable. And the idea was, all right, we serve all these frontline businesses. So if we use the same metrics they use, to hold themselves accountable, we leverage those to ensure that we're doing the right thing. Good things should happen. If you just think of it at a level of, say, I'm an instructor, I don't have, quote unquote, control over this human being once they depart, the nest that I'm running. And there is there's a component there that people get concerned about. That said, it ended up being the right move, right? Because at the end of the day, you have a true north, right? It's not just about a level 1 evaluation. It's more about what impact are we having, and are folks able to execute on specific tasks? So again, using that instructor example, the instructor now is engaging with the students and saying, okay, I'm concerned about this person being able to do X versus, okay, is my review going to be good? Because that becomes more of a social interaction, and that should be a natural part of the job. And instructors are great at that. I mean, that's part of their DNA. But having that focus around the data piece makes a lot of things more consistent, more accurate. The other thing I would say is that it's also driving a foundation for AI. So it was definitely a decision that is helping us as we move forward.
Those are some big changes. Where do you think L&D is headed in the next 5 years?
So I think AI is a big piece. I mean, a lot of folks will talk about how that's the hot term right now, but it's real. It's real. It will definitely change almost every aspect of learning. I mean, it already is in some ways, if you think about it, right? Right now in the near term, I'm seeing, what you would almost call like an AI coach, right? Think about like personalized support at this like unprecedented scale. I did a presentation not too long ago at a conference, and think about the type of support we might provide like an executive, right? You have an executive coach, and that's important, and you should do that given the level of that human being in the company. They have that personalized support. The beautiful thing about AI is that democratizes that. All of a sudden you have this like executive coach for almost every level of management, and you can do that at scale. You can do that cost effectively. And that's already starting to become a reality, and it's in the early stages. We'll probably look back and say, wow, that was interesting, but it will get better. So that to me is a big one. The other thing I'm excited about is the amount of impact L&D will have in terms of learning. So if you think about the 70-20-10 model, right? 70 is that experiential learning, 20 is the social learning, and 10 is that formal. We play in that 10 space. For the most part, we own that 10 space. Now, we do participate maybe in the 20 and the 70. And we might set up something or frameworks that folks can participate in, but it's most of the business driving those pieces. In the future, what I see, or in the near term, not even the future, is AI is going to allow us to create hyper-realistic simulations. So think flight simulation when you're thinking about pilots and things like that. Those are very expensive, but they have to do those things and they work. Think about that being applied to a whole myriad of positions and educating somebody. And at the same time, they have a batting cage and they're taking swings at the bat and they're getting different types of pitches and their confidence is going up, and you're coaching them on very specific gaps. And this simulation is giving them all these scenarios, acting like a customer. It's getting upset. It's happy. It wants to see if you show empathy or not. All of these things. Now, all of a sudden, you have a new hire on day one, and your competency is dramatically higher than it ever was before. And then, if you look at like speed to proficiency, something like that, that is massively accelerated, right? So that's something I'm really excited to see. And I think that if not right now, very soon, that's going to become a reality. I'm seeing it more and more. I think we'll see a lot of performance support, right? So think about these like dynamic levels of support at the moment of need. So while you're doing your job, you're getting exactly what you need in the format that you needed to get things done. The thing I'm most excited about has to go back to the data piece. If you think of AI as a car, data is the fuel. And if you have good fuel, your car can go faster, it can do more things. And I believe that the convergence of data and AI is going to create a crystal ball. And that crystal ball is going to allow us to predict gaps before they arrive.
That would be a game changer. I'm hearing what you said. I'm applying it to my world, and I'm saying, gosh, I spend so much effort trying to get predictive measurements so that I can be ahead. But at the end of the day, I'm still behind. I'm still reacting to, okay, well, I saw last month they didn't do A, B, and C. So I need to get with them this month on it, but it's already a month late.
Yes, exactly. And it can change so many things. This is just with L&D. I mean, AI is such a large topic. It can go in a lot of directions, but if I was looking at near term and then long term, I think there's some things right around the corner that are already starting to percolate that'll have that impact with the coaching, real-time support and so on, and us embracing more formal learning. But it's almost like recreating the job in training. So when you get on the job, it feels very natural, and you've swung that bat a lot and you're ready to hit some home runs.
So let's change gears a little bit. As I've mentioned, our listeners are people who are wanting to move further into the L&D community. What kind of skill set would be something you would recommend they focus on? One or two. What's a strong skill set that you think is going to be in great demand?
I think it's the skill set everyone will need. And you'll hear this talked about, but I think it's a skill set everyone will need. And it's definitely not limited to L&D, but it's that natural curiosity, that willingness to adapt to change, learn things, basically be able to learn at a pace that you're comfortable with and not shy away from change and evolve with things. When like ChatGPT first came out, we did an orientation, and I ran the orientation with my team, and I knew there was a little bit of fear there. It's natural because you'll see reactions of people's faces when they use like GPT the first time, going back to like late 2022, early 2023. And it was this look of awe and fear all at the same time, because it's amazing. But then you stop and say, well, wait a minute, that's doing what I do. And one of the analogies I came up with for that was, all right, if I gave you an axe, could you chop down a tree? Now, you may think you can. You know what an axe is. You know where to purchase one. But there's a whole myriad of videos of YouTube of people destroying their property, chopping down a tree. The point of it is, an axe doesn't make you a lumberjack. ChatGPT does not make you an instructional designer or a learning professional. However, if someone else comes along with a chainsaw and you're the lumberjack that said, love my axe, I'm going to keep using my axe. Well, you're not going to be as productive as that other person, right? And you'll probably be out of a job because the other person is chopping down way more wood than you. So the idea with that is, get to know this now, get past all those things, have that curiosity, right? Adopt that new tool, understand it. Because a lot of fear comes from a lack of understanding. Understand it and evolve with it. So as that car gets better, you've been driving it since the first model, right? And as it evolves, it's not as hard to evolve with it. Where if you're waiting, all of a sudden this fancy car comes up and you're like, I've never driven this before. It's a problem.
Fair point. I agree with the open to change, and you definitely have to be. And as we get older, I think it's harder and harder to be open to all these big changes.
Absolutely. Yes.
They're coming at us very fast.
Absolutely. And you kind of got to pace yourself with it too. I mean, I'm running into that as well. I'm constantly trying to filter out, okay, what's relevant and what's, maybe a little jazz. So you always have to look at what's the source of the information, where is it coming from? Because just like anything, there's folks that are trying to promote certain things because it's in their best interest to do so, right? And there's naysayers who are trying to do the same thing because it's in their best interest to do so. So it's trying to swim through the noise of what's real, what's hype, and what can you practically apply to your situation, what makes the most sense.
Fair point. So, Kevin, can you tell me about a professional mentor you had in your life that was impactful?
I've been lucky to have a lot of them. I've worked with a lot of smart people, and that's probably been the biggest benefit of being in this industry is just working with a lot of great people. Early on, I would say the first mentor I had in the L&D space was Mike Glass. I mentioned earlier how, when I transitioned from the business to the L&D organization at Fidelity, Mike had run that organization. It was one of the bigger ones. And at the time, he was fully embracing e-learning, and he was looking for ways to just do things better and take advantage of the opportunities from a technology perspective and so on that was in front of us. But at the same time, not leaving the tried and true components, the fundamental components behind. He taught me how to, in my mind, he was a good role model for showing courage and trying things and not being afraid to push the envelope a bit. And that has helped me dramatically over my career in a lot of ways. More recently, I would say mentor I have now with Liberty has been Tiffany Dodson. She's been dynamite in terms of just a really great mentor. She's a fantastic leader. She was on a podcast with Adam Grant not too long ago.
Can you explain to our listeners where you get your industry news?
So definitely from the standards, right? TD Magazine, Corporate Learning Network, training industry, those spaces. I have found a lot of my success has more been predicated on looking outside the industry. What I like to do is try to keep pace with what's happening in the technology space, what's happening in science, what's happening in data, and how can we apply those to our world? How can we leverage advancements in that space to make our work better? And that's allowed me to be innovative in some spaces. And sometimes it's just obvious, right? Like connecting the dots. It's like, why didn't we do this sooner? It just makes sense. But a lot of my success, I would say, has been predicated on having that external view. A good example was back at Fidelity, 2005. At the time, YouTube, I think, was either not out yet or just coming out. There was really no standards for online video or anything like that. And I wanted to start to leverage that media. And I basically just read books on news media advertising techniques. I read books on folks that had produced 60 Minutes and things like that to learn how do you inform people but engage them at the same time. And a lot of the approaches we used are more common now, but in reality, they're just based on other best practices that are out there for that medium. It's just applying those to what we do. So again, there were no books that said, hey, this is how you do an educational video. It just didn't exist. I remember one time I Googled it, and a thesis for this woman over at the University of Singapore, I think it was, had written something about media in learning and development. And that was the only thing I saw that spoke to it. So I was like, okay, I think we're doing something relatively new here.
Very good. Last question for you. What is one book that you would recommend anyone wanting to become a learning leader should read?
So the one that I love, and it really falls into a lot of the categories. I think I've been talking about a bit is make it stick. I think it's make it stick: the science of successful learning. And there's three authors: Brown, Rodiger, and McDaniel. The book's just fantastic. It's fantastic. It's all based in cognitive science, which is great, and it does a really great job of challenging a lot of those traditional beliefs that you and I kind of grew up with. You know, those things that folks would tell you, and you would say, okay, that makes sense, but it doesn't seem to work here. Why is that? You know, because if it's a rule, it should work every time, right? So this book just, I think, knocked the cover off the ball in terms of just really challenging learning styles. You know, there's learning preferences, but there's not learning style. Like, that doesn't apply. In addition to that, they talk about how, you know, you learn from recall. You know, you don't learn from reading something 50 times. And that's what we were taught, even in school. Read the material, and you'll learn. But that's not true. That is not true, right? At the end of the day, the other thing that really blew my mind is the idea that testing should be used for learning. It's also good for assessment. That's fine. You can still do that, but it's also a way that you can create a level of retention, right? Retain the knowledge you have. So a lot of the stuff in that book really drove me in terms of my strategy and focus, and what the rules are, for lack of a better term, when you're trying to create a learning solution.
So I have to agree with you. I read that book many years ago, and I'm re-listening to it right now because actually Dr. Keith Keating recommended it in a keynote that I attended a few weeks
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
So I'm re-listening, and I'm hearing the part. I just finished the part about reading and reading and reading the same thing. You don't retain it, but
Yes.
quizzing yourself on it. And I said, well, that's what I used to do because I always had a hard time with recall. So all through college, I would answer the questions at the end of the chapter. I would write myself little question note cards. And I would memorize, and my grades went way up when I started doing those things. So I'm like,
Wait.
that's right. And I remember when I was an instructional designer working, I was at ADP. I was working and I had read his book, and I started putting in a quiz question. It wasn't like an official quiz, but I'd ask the learner, okay, here's the situation. What do you think is the right answer? Before I presented the content on what the right answer was, because his materials said, if you make them think about it first, then they'll pay more attention and really contextualize what you've just done.
It's great. I mean, the funny thing was, as I read the book, I started thinking back to grade school flashcards. Those worked. They worked. And it's so funny because I remember, in high school and college, you got away from those because you started saying, well, that was elementary school. That's why I did that. People would give you a hard time for it, but it was like, no, this works. And then the science proves that out, right? The science just kind of tells us what we already knew in some cases. But I found that book fascinating. It was great.
No, it was good. And I did the flashcards in college, so I wasn't saying get away from them. I'm like,
I got back to
don't
them
care.
in
I
college.
still have to memorize.
I did the same. I got back to them in college because I was like, listen, this definitely, this is working. I don't care if somebody looks at me and says, oh, I did that in second grade. It doesn't really matter. What works.
I don't care if I get an A on the test. I don't care for what I had to do.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Yeah, it is. It's very interesting how we have all these assumptions about what makes good learning, but I also love that it's real scientific evidence of what works in that book. So it's a great book to recommend to anybody in the learning field, wherever they want to go.
Yes, agreed. 100%. I think it's great. And the science part of it, to me, I like to have the science, the rules, right? The consistency there. The challenge or the exciting part of it is, okay, how do you apply it? That's to me the fun part. Like, okay, how do you figure out how to package this so you can get this to happen, right? So
That is the
I
fun
think it's
part.
fun.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely.
This has been a wonderful talk, Kevin. I have really enjoyed it. I want to thank you so much for being a guest on our show. As a thank you, our charity at Training Pros is planting trees around the world. So we're going to plant 5 trees in your name, and I'm going to send you a certificate letting you know where they were planted.
That's excellent. I appreciate that. And then it's been an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate you having me on the show.
Thank you. And everybody tune in next it's time for our show, but thank you, Kevin Farrell from Liberty Mutual.
Thank you.